Let's discuss some predictions for 2025 that don't involve the Chicago White Sox losing. We'll discuss that with my guest next on Locked On White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan and the site expert of SouthsideShowdown.com, part of the Fansided Network, and also I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press, and thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode, subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already, and also follow or subscribe to the show at wherever you get your podcasts. Well, Chicago White Sox, MLB.com's beat reporter Scott Merkin joined me to discuss some predictions for the 2025 season, along with how the offseason is going and what it's like to cover an historic losing season as he just covered in 2024. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. All right, Scott, so in terms of your predictions, you got Colson Montgomery winning Rookie of the Year. What went into that thinking?
Yeah, I went out on a limb on that one, considering, he didn't overwhelm overall with the numbers at AAA Charlotte last year. I think he hit 214 right overall. Although he did hit for power, he did still get on base. He did show some extra base potential overall with doubles and home runs, and he found something at the end of the year. And I just had a feeling that number one, I have a feeling he's going to break camp with the team. I really do at this point. Now that can change. Obviously, there's a lot that goes into it. They could add someone else to the roster, although I don't think they're gonna spend very big to add. So I think it's set up for him to have a shot to, to be the Sox shortstop from day one this year. And if not day one, very shortly thereafter. I like his confidence. I like the fact that he seems to have found something over, I think it was like the last 99 at-bats last year, where he wasn't crushing the ball, but it was back to the normal that they've expected from Colson. And Colson's a key guy in this rebuild. Colson's the guy they're kind of, I don't want to say building around, but he's at the center of this. They have the pitching. They're just, they're short on the bats right now. Or it looks like they have the pitching. You never know what you have until guys get to the majors, right? It's great to have the number 1 and 2 left-handed prospects and pitching prospects in the game, according to MLB Pipeline with Noah Schultz and Hagen Smith. But they, of course, have not pitched in the majors yet. So you got to, it looks good. The pitching looks ahead of the hitting. So you need guys like Colson. You need guys like Edgar Carroll, Braden Montgomery, Kyle Teal to step up. And I just, without taking nothing away from the other great rookies that could be out there, I just had a feeling he was going to have a breakout year this year. This first year was going to be, he's struggled. And I think if you talk to guys who have struggled in the majors for the first time without ever struggling before, it's tough to kind of deal with. It's tough to kind of figure out. You're doing this, in front of, I don't know, anywhere from 12,000 to 40,000 fans. And when you're in an 0 for 40 slump, it's different than doing it at the minor league level. So those struggles may have actually helped Colson, may have actually given him a step up moving forward. And the talent is there. For lack of a better word, the chutzpah is there. And I just think this is a guy who can do it. I really do. Now, it might have been a safer pick to just say the prognostication to say he was going to break camp with the team, but why not go on a limb? Now, I will add, I'm not going to say what they were, but if you look back, my preseason bold predictions the last few years have not been very good. So we'll see if this one is a little more on track.
Yeah, like whenever you get that assignment, you got to be like, oh, great, I get to do something that I have no idea will actually potentially happen.
Well, yeah,
and that type of stuff.
And, predicting the White Sox will be better. Well, geez, you sure hope so, right? I mean, they were 41 and 120. I'm not speaking out of turn here. I think everyone on the Sox would say, even though, they're not built to contend, obviously, everyone on that team would say, yeah, geez, we need to be better this year. We need to keep taking steps forward. So that's too easy a prediction, or to say, Jonathan Cannon's going to be a solid pitcher. Well, that's, was proven last year too. So I think believing in Colson, and I talked to him a couple times during this offseason, and he sounds like he found something. He's working in Nashville right now. He works with Sean Burke and Jake Berger, and there's a whole group that goes out there to Nashville and hits. And I'm not, Garrett Crochet lives out there too, but I'm not sure if he's part of that being a pitcher. But, so I think he's going to be ready for when the opportunity comes this year.
Did he mention if he had a hand injury? Because I had a guest on earlier, I think it was Clint Gross or whatever, a couple weeks ago, saying that he had like a cut on his hand. Did he mention anything like that?
He didn't really talk about it. I mean, I just think that, as he said, baseball's tough, and you're going to have slumps. Even the best of them have had slumps, as the joke, not the joke, but the explanation always goes, if you go 3 for 10 every 10 at bats, and you're going to reach the Hall of Fame probably, right? Or you have a pretty good chance that you're going to be considered, at least. You're going to be considered an excellent hitter. So I think he just, just had an off year. Just things didn't click for him. And to his credit, he fought through it. They had a Zoom with him, some of the White Sox hitting coaches in the organization, and then his personal coach, I believe it was. And after that, it kind of turned around. And I think it was more mental than physical. I think it was just kind of finding an approach that worked, kind of fighting through his, knowing the Sox are there 100% behind him. And that kind of turned things around. And, obviously it still wasn't to what people were expecting from Colson, but, I think he'll set the table, set that bar as he goes.
Well, what I also liked about that prediction is if he does win the Rookie of the Year, you get that extra draft pick. I mean, that is would be very key. So that's why I'm looking forward to either Carroll, Teal, or Montgomery potentially winning the Rookie of the Year if they can, obviously hit up to that potential.
They have some options, and then they should have some options next year too, right? Because I would think if Schultz and Smith do come up this year, it'll be near the end and probably in a kind of relief or, managed innings sort of role. So, you may have them in line for next year too.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously that's where you get a little bit of hope there. You also had Sean Burke being the breakout pitcher. What are you seeing as places I've seen, like Zips is not very high on him being a breakout pitcher? What are you seeing that makes you think he's definitely going to break out in 2025, maybe even like Garrett Crochet?
Well, I'm basing it on a couple of things. Well, I mean, Garrett Crochet, you're talking, maybe one of the best starting pitchers in baseball. So maybe setting that bar for Sean might be a little bit high, but I understand what you're saying. And, Garrett had success. Garrett had a full year as a reliever before he, had Tommy John, where he was pretty dominant down there. And then Garrett took it to, all-star level. I just think Sean, number one, he's only 2 years, 2 off seasons removed from being the number 5 White Sox prospect, according to MLB Pipeline. Then he had some injuries. Then he had some underperformance, which he, talked about. He did, even last year, he didn't exactly dominate across the minor leagues, but man, he got up there, and granted, in a short amount of time, and it was 19 2/3 innings, he just looked like he belonged there. I think people have told me that the key thing with him is his delivery. His delivery can get a little out of whack at times. But Grady Sizemore talked about this last year when we watched him pitch. Not Grady, watched Sean pitch, is that the moment doesn't seem too big for him. He believes he should be there. He believes he can handle it. And he pitched very well. So, again, breakout to me is a solid major league pitcher. A breakout isn't, man, this guy's an all-star. Or, geez, Sean Burke is top 5 in Cy Young, or is going to be the opening day starter. Breakout means he's a valuable starter, whereas he was, I don't want to say afterthought, but never say afterthought. He was kind of out of the picture for a little bit due to injuries, due to underperformance. And now, again, they added Martin Perez. So if you look at the rotation right now, you have Cannon, Davis Martin. You think Drew Thorpe, they said Drew Thorpe was coming along fine, from his bone spur surgery at the end of last year. And then probably Bryce Wilson, Martin Perez, and then Bryce Wilson and Sean Burke competing for that last spot in the rotation. But, I think Sean showed something last year. I think Sean showed he has good stuff. And I think Sean showed that he has that mindset to be successful. Nothing against the Zips or all the predictions, but I think they're basically the same as me predicting Colson could be Rookie of the Year, right? I mean, you can put things into computer, and it's a key part of the game. Analytics are a huge part of the game, just as the scouting eye is a part of the game. But if you could predict it that easily, you just put stuff through a computer and sign those guys, right? If you can, and put them in your lab. So I believe in what I saw in Sean Burke, and I think he's going to be a viable starter for this team this year.
Well, that's why I wanted to ask you about that, because you've obviously watched him up close, in this
right.
Where he starts, and that was because I watch him on TV on there, and you're obviously at the park. But the thing is too with Zips, obviously they look at like kind of what is your last couple of production been, even at the minors, and yeah, as you said, it wasn't exactly thrilling because of injuries, and now that pitching at Charlotte is just really hard to do.
It is. It's a tough ballpark for pitchers. It's a great ballpark for hitters, and that's, I think, one of the things that people talked about Colson is that, man, he struggled, and he was at that ballpark in Charlotte. But again, with Colson, he found something, and I think Sean found not the same thing, but he found that same confidence in his system because those two are very good friends, Sean and Colson, and they worked together a lot. Like I said, they worked together in the offseason in Nashville, for a period of time after the holidays, I believe. And yeah, I understand that, you go on numbers, and it'd be tougher to make Colson as a Rookie of the Year because that means, he's the number 1 first-year guy in the American League. But I think if you watch Sean pitch last year, again, very small sample size. I want to say 22 or 23 strikeouts in 19 2/3 innings, very low ERA. But he just looked like he had something, Besides his stuff, he looked like he has it. Now, again, that doesn't mean he's going to be flawless, but I think it means that he's going to be a contributor.
Yeah, I fully agree with you on that too, because the biggest key that he'll have to, jump over was what's gonna happen when baseball makes the adjustment to him? Can he adjust
Of
from where
course.
baseball comes from?
And that's for every young player, right? I mean, we saw that with Drew Thorpe came up last year, and Drew doesn't have that high octane kind of stuff. Now, Drew also might have been pitching with a little bit of an injury issue, because he had the bone spur surgery. But almost every guy in the majors you see, barring the very few that are just out of the gate astronomically talented and astronomically good, have to adjust once the league adjusts to them.
I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. One of my favorite recent memories was taking my daughter to the Sox and Brewers game this past season, and I loved watching her enjoy the ice cream. She really enjoyed going to the kids area, and we both took in the baseball, and we just loved it. Well, she loved the ice cream in the kids area more, but it was still a fun day with my wife and daughter at the ballpark. And if you love going to sports, music, theater, or comedy live and in person, I recommend using the Gametime app. Now, Gametime has made it even easier to get tickets for your favorite events with their new feature, Gametime Picks. This feature filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And recently, I was looking for tickets to an upcoming Marquette game using the Gametime app. And with Gametime Picks, I have found amazing deals, and you can even see the view of the seat that you're going to be potentially buying with their panoramic view. The super deal was particularly impressive, offering great seats and unbeatable prices. Plus, the app's all-in pricing shows the total cost upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Gametime today, because what time is it? Game time. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. And if you can't catch the show on YouTube, Locked On White Sox is available on all major podcast platforms. So make sure you follow or subscribe on places such as Apple or Spotify. Either way, get your 30-minute fix of Chicago White Sox baseball venting with me. And let's jump back into my conversation with MLB.com White Sox beat reporter Scott Merkin. Yeah, and hopefully those bone spurs do clear up, because I think it was what McGuffey had the Birmingham Barons coach on, where they think that those bone spurs, if they get cleared up, he could maybe get that fastball up to 94, where that's really going to set up that changeup even more devastating. Is there still any chance in heck that there is a reunion with Jose Quintana? You kind of had that as one of your predictions. Obviously, they go and sign Perez for $5 million. It doesn't sound like this is the offseason they're going to be spending any money, but is there a chance that we see Jose Quintana on the south side?
I would think unlikely. I think Perez is kind of that guy, that I kind of envisioned in who they should sign. They needed another veteran in that. They needed a veteran in that rotation. Bryce Wilson has done a little bit of both, where he started and relieved. But you can't put all those innings, with Garrett gone now, on, the young guys like Jonathan Cannon, who was great last year. Drew Thorpe, who was kind of up and down and then dealt with the bone spur injury. Davis Martin, who was outstanding when he came back from his, Tommy John recovery. And then Sean Burke, who had the short stint there in the majors. So they needed a guy who could come out and take innings, come out and, and be a leader, kind of a mentor leader for that rotation. And I think that's Martin Perez. Now, I don't really know much at this point about Quintana's market. I don't know if he would, come back for a 1-year deal that's a little lower, and would the Sox be interested? The Sox were the guys who kind of, put him on the map, and Quintana put himself on the map, obviously, but the Sox were the one who found him off waivers from the Yankees, and he became, 1-2 with Chris Sale in that rotation. So I would say Perez is that guy who I envision Quintana possibly being.
Did you envision the White Sox making this many minor league moves with invite to camp? Because it sounds like they signed another guy today. I mean, it's just they keep on trying to address maybe holes with just more NRI guys.
Well, I think a couple of things. Number one, they were not going to spend in this offseason. That has been proven. And I think part of it is, just budget concerns, and part of it is this is the year 2 of the rebuild, and this is, as we've been told, is going to, you're going to see the young guys get a chance to play, the young guys get a chance to do their thing, and then Chris Katz in the front office, Will Venable in the dugout, and everyone else on his staff will get a chance to look and evaluate and say, okay, we know we have this and this, now we got to fill in on this. And I think also the NRIs are coming out like piecemeal, like usually you get what I think next week or sometime before spring training. It would make sense before Sox Fest Live next week. They'll announce the NRIs, and that's not just the minor league deals for major league guys, but also the prospects. I can envision Noah Schultz being one of the guys, possibly Hagen Smith being one of the guys. And just because they get invited doesn't mean they'll be there for the full camp, but just to get them experience at the big league, level with major league spring training. But I think you're seeing a bunch of these guys come out one by one, and they'll all be on that master list next week. So it's not like they're signing these guys separately, and then they're adding another 20 new signings along with that. These are part of the list that's going to come out next week. So it makes sense. I mean, if you can add a pitcher, there's been I can't think of a ton off the top of my head, but there have been guys over the years who have been non-roster. You go back to Esteban Loaiza in 2003 was a non-roster invite and finished second in the American League Cy Young that year. First year I covered the team. And, I'm not saying they're going to find a guy who's going to finish second in the Cy Young, but you might be able to find someone through this list, through this kind of addition, who can help this team. And there certainly are opportunities, whether it's in the bullpen or, inevitably you'll need someone in the rotation just because you rarely go with the same 5, 6, 7 guys you do to start the season.
Yeah, what I like about these NRIs is it's not so many Kansas City Royals, and also it's a lot of guys that are, you're getting off the scrap heap from failed prospects, which makes a lot of sense. Can't hurt to kick the tires on some of these guys.
Sox have always been guys, even back to the Kenny Williams, Rick Hahn days, they always like the guys who had that pedigree, like that first-round pedigree that may not have made it, but give them the kind of second chance to get there. And we'll see if anyone pans out of this list that we have right now.
Yeah, this is the perfect time to do it. The biggest change that basically happened, though, is more behind the scenes in the front office. What have you kind of heard and seen, and are you kind of impressed by the changes that have been made?
Yeah, I think, they're doing what they had to do. They're building a stronger infrastructure. They're going deeper in the international market, which will be announced when we're taping this, this week. I think it's stuff that needed to be done. I think it brings them up to speed, not necessarily ahead, but up to speed with other teams in baseball. But I think ultimately you need good players. You can have the system. People like the Dodgers system. Well, the Dodgers are a bad example because they just kind of spend whatever they want to get pretty much. And they have that team that is contending for the World Series pretty much from the jump every year in spring training. But I think, ultimately you got to develop the players, and all the infrastructure in the world won't help if you don't finish this rebuild when the time comes. You develop these young guys, you get the guys, hopefully the dominant part of the lineup and the rotation are from within your system. And I'm not saying you have to go out and spend $300 million on a player or even 200, even 150, but you have to add guys more than what they've done this offseason. Nothing against the guys they've added who should help the team this year, but you've got to, finish it off to kind of take it to the next step. And while they, had good teams, they went to the playoffs in 20, they won the division in 21, finished 522 in, a year that kind of defined Rick Hahn's famous comment about mired in mediocrity, which came years earlier. I don't know if they ever got that kind of one or two guys that finished things off in the rebuild. I'll just use an example across town where I think John Lester and Jason Hayward kind of finished the rebuild for the Cubs, right? And again, neither one of those were not cheap. It's easy for me to throw money around, right? I don't own a team, but Lester was what 100. They're both in like the 170, $180 million range, which is a big range. But like I said, you don't have to get the top. You don't have to go out and get Juan Soto, but you need to kind of finish it up. Back to your question, though, I think everything they've done has been done with a purpose, has been done with a design, and Chris has had that from the get-go. He's built a great front office. He's got great people around him. He's got a good variety around him. And I think, Will Venable was their number one target from what I know as manager. He's got a good staff around him. A lot of guys who are back from last year who kind of know what's going on. And I think, it's kind of unfair to say, well, Marcus Thames presided over an offense that was the worst in baseball last year. You can't put it all on him, just as if the hitters are crushing the ball. You can't put it all on the hitting coach either. It's kind of a mix. But I think what they've done is built up this organization to give them a good base to add these good players to, and knowing that they have maybe a better chance of developing guys than maybe they did in the past.
Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, shout out to all the everydayers. I appreciate your loyalty. Please hit the like button on today's episode and recommend to your fellow Sox fans or baseball fans, friends, to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox, wherever they get their podcasts, as this show is available on all major podcast platforms. And we just passed the 2,200 subscribers on YouTube. So let's keep building up that community. Let's get the subscriber base up. So feel free to recommend, even if it's non-baseball, non-White Sox fans. I mean, I got folks, Mariners fans jumping in every now and again. Had a lot of Blue Jays fans, chiming in on the episode I did with Luis Robert Jr. and possibly going to the Blue Jays, that type of stuff. If you're fascinated about, can people still be fans of the White Sox? Well, this is the show that you can recommend to them. And hey, I like to try to inform, people on baseball. So let's just jump back into my conversation with MLB.com Chicago White Sox beat reporter Scott Merkin. What was it like to cover that 2024 team? I mean, you said, you started in 2003, you covered the World Series in 2005, you cover all these great moments, and then the worst team ever. How was
even
that?
in 07, when they finished 72 and 90 under Ozzie? First of all, it was Ozzie, so there's entertainment value right there, And then number two, that was the year Tommy hit his 500th in walk-off fashion. That was the year Jenks retired. I think it was 42 batters in a row to set the ML record, which Burley broke. And then Mark Burley threw the no-hitter against Texas, which he had one guy on base, Sammy Sosa, picked him off, so he faced 27 guys. Burley is amazing. I mean, Burley, maybe I'm biased because I covered him for so many years and dealt with him and just know that he's like the most unaffected superstar I've ever dealt with in my life. But I just think some of the stuff that he's done over time may not get the appreciation. He's kind of like Sabathia without the kind of frontline chances to perform. He was great in 05. He pitched in 08 too, right in the playoffs. And I believe he was on the 2000 team out of the bullpen. But, the guy's thrown a perfect game, a no-hitter. Would he have 14 straight seasons, I think. 15, because he just missed it, of 198 innings, 30 starts, and double-digit victories. And that makes such a difference to a team when you can count on that. But anyways, that was when you asked. It was a tough year, but people would ask me, they would kind of call me, and I have a friend who said, like, he was a big Gilbert, as I am, was a big Gilbert Gottfried fan. And when Gilbert sadly passed away, he said he got more calls from his friends and family about that than when his son was born. I mean, he was joking, obviously. Yeah. But I got more calls about, how you doing last year than any other time in my life, even when I've been sick. And, it's our job. That's what we're there for. And there were a lot of good stories. There were a lot of stories to be told. There were a lot of young guys who got a chance. But yeah, it wasn't fun for them. It wasn't fun for us. I mean, we don't get paid by the victories. So, ultimately, it doesn't affect us in that one way or the other. But you want to see good baseball. You want to see compelling baseball. And it just wasn't good baseball for most of the year. It just wasn't, it wasn't for a lot of the year, actually. They finished strong. They had a good last week. But it's hard for me to even put, like, as you see, I'm kind of stumbling over it. It's hard for me to even put it into exact words. I saw history in the wrong direction. I saw history of a team that lost more games in one single season than any team in the modern era, with all due respect to the Cleveland Spiders. 41, 121. And I've said this in the beginning. The Sox knew it was going to be rough. I told someone whose baseball opinion I respect very highly before the year that I thought maybe they could get to like 66, 67, maybe in 70 wins. And he said, "You're crazy. They're not getting that high." So I think they knew it was going to be a rough year. I don't think anyone in that organization, I know no one in that organization envisioned this happening, And the problem with them is they had a very thin room for error, thin margin for error, and they had nothing but error. And I'm not talking about the way they played on the field. I'm talking about within the first 10 days, Eloy, Robert, and Moncada all got hurt, and Robert and Moncada were out for a significant amount of time. Vaughn and Benintendi, who were kind of the other two in the big group hitting wise, struggled for the entire first half. They lost games every which way you could imagine. But nonetheless, there were good stories to be told, and I felt like I hit some of those. And I think, I have a good group to work with on the Sox beat, good people. So it's not like it's, a chore to go there. But yeah, I look forward to covering teams, maybe not this year, but in the next year or so, that are, more competitive and looking more towards the postseason instead of kind of rebuilding the organization.
Yeah, I just got two more questions.
Sure.
Did you ever, when you were covering some of those games, did you ever think to yourself, there's no way they could have lost in that fashion? Because as you brought up, a lot of just the happenstance went against them. A lot of the variance went against them. Were you like, there's no way they can lose this game in this fashion, and they just did that?
There are probably a few, but I think the one that hit me, and we talked to Will Venable about this at the manager's breakfast at the winter meetings. Each team has a table where the writers and reporters sit with their respective manager. And it was that game against Texas where Andrew Vaughn hit what would have been the walk-off homer, and Travis Jankowski went over the fence. I mean, well over the fence to make a spectacular catch, and they lost the game because of that. And I think it was Venable who talked with Bochy about putting Jankowski in there in the ninth inning. Kind of a much lesser level story of Ozzie putting Dwayne Wise in to replace Scott Podsednik, and then Wise takes the home run away from Gabe Kapler and preserves Burley's perfect game. But that was one where you just think, well, that's pretty much about it. We've seen it all this year. I mean, even when they have a chance for a big moment like that, it gets taken away. Now, I will add, there were some moments. It wasn't like, even though they were dismal in 41 and 121, they had moments. Benintendi had a couple walk-off home runs. Crochet was outstanding. Almost every start he had, except maybe like 4 or 5 early in the season, was appointment television the way he pitched. So, I just think it was tough, but there was, but yeah, they lost in every which way. I mean, there were just ways, not unimaginable, but you're just kind of like, holy cow, I can't believe this continues to happen. I mean, they lost 21 straight at one point, right? They lost 14 straight home games, I think. Kind of unheard of stuff. And, their offense was obviously the worst in baseball. So they hit a little bit of everything last year in the wrong way.
All right, so final question. College football playoff, are you even going to be watching it because you got Notre Dame and Ohio State? And if you are you actually rooting for Notre Dame?
This is the nightmare football wise of every Michigan football fan. I mean, this is it. Now, it would be a lot tougher if Michigan didn't win the title and go 15-0 last year. If a very average Michigan team hadn't beaten Ohio State in the last game of the year to win for the 4th straight time. But I think I haven't gone to a movie in probably like 10 years at a theater. Maybe that'll be the night that I go see a movie. I heard the Pamela Anderson movie is pretty good, so maybe I'll go see that. And I really do believe I'm not going to root for either team. The way I look at it is either way, Ohio State or Notre Dame loses. So that's the good part of it. But I really do think just the way Ohio State's played, and I got nothing any away from Notre Dame, but I think Ohio State's going to win that game.
Oh, yeah, I think they're going to cruise. And my father-in-law grew up in Ohio, so he's a big Ohio State fan. Me, I've always just been neutral when it comes to the game. Although I've always enjoyed Michigan and the helmets and that, because I went to Marquette. I didn't get I didn't get the luxury of football. No, so I'm a free agent and all that. So I just want to see a good football game. But I know I appreciate your Michigan tweets. I mean, they're very good.
I'm not sure how many people do. They might be getting a little tired of them at this time. But I've had a few emails over the years in my newsletter about why do you mention Michigan so much? I'm like, well, I do. That's how it goes. But yeah, I mean, I see some Michigan fans, diehards like myself, and I'm an alum, obviously. I graduated in 87, who are like, well, even if Ohio State loses or wins, they still lost us. No, I mean, Ohio State will be the champion. You can't take that away. And I'm sure Ohio State will be more than happy to say, hey, congrats to Michigan on beating us in the last week. We're the champions. That they will have no problem putting that on the mantle if they win that. Ultimately, you want to win it. The ultimate goal is not the rivalry. It's like I've always said. I've heard people who've said before, like, oh, if the Bears win 2 games against the Packers, it's a win in the season. No, it's not. It's nice, but 12 wins is a lot better than winning 2 against the Packers and nothing else. So yeah, you want to beat your rivalry. And for Michigan finishing 8-5, that was a huge, huge victory. To win 4 in a row is great, but I would have traded a loss in Ohio State to win the championship. That's for sure.
Although I don't see Michigan wanting to fire like Jim Harbaugh had he lost the national championship game and to Ohio State. I mean, Ohio State might fire Ryan Day if they lose the national championship game. At least the lunatic fringe is out there. I mean, Michigan's.
Well, I think Day is good now, but that's the other side. For the Ohio State fans who say, "Oh, who cares about Michigan? We may win the championship." Okay, point well taken. But then why is a guy who, if he wins this championship, will be 70-10 in his career? And they were talking about after he lost that Michigan game that they should get rid of him. So don't tell me the game doesn't mean anything, because it does mean something. It means a lot. It may be the biggest rivalry in sports. I've just, seen Yankees, Red Sox more from afar. So, Cubs, Cardinals. I'm not sure if the Sox have someone in the division that really is of that level. Maybe the Twins all those years. But I think Michigan, Ohio State football might be the biggest rivalry in sports.
Well, Scott, I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen today. For your second listen, find Locked On MLB. Baseball guru Sully brings a daily blend of humor and baseball, keeping you updated on every rumor and story throughout the offseason. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you're listening to your podcasts. Well, I'll be back tomorrow to discuss the team's ZIP projections and the team's international free agent signings. Feel free to leave comments about today's discussion with MLB.com Chicago White Sox beat reporter Scott Merkin, and you can leave them at the episode page. You can leave them on the episode page on YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, at Todd J. Dub, or at Locked On Sox, or you can email me at lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com. Have a great day, and I'll see you